Can I get a yeah? Amen. For calling all beings, I'm your host, DJ. And guess what, party people? We're getting the band back together, man. I'd have my hands up right now, but Hera has decided, yeah, there she is. Hera has decided that she wants to be here, and I'm not in a position to tell her otherwise. Welcome back to Calling All Beings. It has been a good long time since we've been together, approximately a month till we were all together for Mr. James Iandoli. James, I come to praise his name, Iandoli. So here is my co-conspirator, Hera. You start messing with the computer, and then the deal's off as far as you being here. Hi, Hera. That's what Julie says. There she goes. All right.
Remember the cab.
You're gonna sit in until Courtney gets here. Is that what's up? Okay. All right. So welcome back to my brother, who I got to spend an hour with last night, learning how to do something that you guys always get to see him do, which he makes look so effortless in Canva, and that is, of course, at A Wave Soul, my man, Money Nathan.
What's going on, everybody? Man, it has been a minute since we've been together. It's good to see you guys and catch up. I can't wait to get into this discussion. I know everybody's enjoyed reading the book, and it's going to be a good one.
It really is, man. We're about to get up into it. Hello, Philip Smith, Benji in the building. We haven't seen Benji in so damn long, but before we get to all you people in chat, we're going to get to the beautiful face I just saw that you guys aren't seeing, and that is at Study of UAP, Debs. Woo! Can I get?
Hi, everybody. Hello.
Electron.
All
right, here we go.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I got the whole crowd. Thank you, crowd.
You are quite welcome, Deb. I mean, I could see you at an open mic night somewhere in Baltimore, doing some sort of a reading and then getting an applause. What do you think about that, Deb?
A little snap applause.
I could do it. I could dig it.
Yeah?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah,
it's like you're the talking book right now, Deb. That's kind of what the book is talking to us.
Yes, it is. It's speaking to me.
Yeah.
The way the crime scene spoke to Trooper Proctor in Canton. So we're gonna get into Luis Elizondo's book, Imminent, and this was, in my opinion, an outstanding book. But before I get to my commentary, we're gonna start off with Money Nathan. We're gonna go to Deb's, and eventually, we're gonna go to Montana/Alaska zone/Pennsylvania zone, Courtney Marcassani. But for right now, Money, please, sir. Initial thoughts.
Yeah, I enjoyed the book a lot. Lou has been a figure of a lot of attention in the community, and he's dominated the spotlight in many ways for the last several years. And since he had his last show on the podcast circuit, which was our show, he's now back on the circuit. Before he took off, he spent some time with us, which was really nice.
Yeah,
get a chance to chat with him. And before that show, I recall him just seeming like he was kind of relieved and excited to take a break. And I can understand why. He had been basically pounding the pavement of the UFO circuit and the media circuit for some time, trying to drum up the interest, trying to get the effort underway to get the spotlight turned onto this topic in an official capacity. And I think he felt like he had gotten far enough in that journey to take a break and work on the book and finish that effort. And so it's nice to see that the fruits of all of his labor have finally come to fruition in the publishing of this book. I enjoyed reading it. It was very easy to read. I think he did a great job just writing it. Generally, it gave me a good insight, or a better insight, into kind of who Lou is as a person, his journey, his professional career, what he's what he values, what he's kind of focused on from a mission oriented perspective. I think it humanized him, and it also just maybe brought this topic closer to him in a way that I hadn't seen it before. Like you kind of, if you talk, or if you're listening to Lou and talking with him, you get the sense that he is kind of a UFO guy. But in this book, it comes out more clearly to me that he really wasn't a UFO guy, not much at all. And he, kind of landed into this. And even to this day, while he feels a strong compulsion to, kind of get focus on this topic, it's clear to me that he's not really a ufologist. He's not someone that has read all of the UFO books and done all of the UFO deep dives and that kind of thing. So his knowledge of UFO lore isn't as deep as, someone like a Richard Dolan, for example. But but his passion for this is pretty clear, and I think that comes in large part from his government service, his service of the people through those government agencies, and what he sees as kind of an abuse of power, an abuse of the money that has been kind of funneled away into these programs over many, many decades, and the public has a right to know what the government knows about this. So really enjoyed it. I'm looking forward to getting y'all's thoughts on it as well. So who do you want to go to next?
Debs, please. Yeah.
Deb, what were your thoughts on the book?
Okay, so as DJ knows, I am not easy to impress, and he teases me about this. I'm really just
I've been
not
trying for
easy
years.
to impress.
Sorry, God.
It's amazing she puts up with us.
What
right?
I got from this book wasn't in like a horror story. That's what I got from it. Like, that was the bigger thing. It was a personal story about his journey, and some of the knowledge that he picked up along the way was shared with us. And the fact that he did it this way, he has clearly stated, has now given him license to talk about the topics that were covered in this book with the permission from the Pentagon. So I think that was the bigger purpose behind the book. To just say, look, if I have this in writing with that permission, now I can talk about it. And I can just say, having met Lou, I decided instead of reading the book, I wanted to hear him, I wanted to hear his book. And again, I feel like that was the bigger part of it. It was him. It's about him and his journey. So I appreciated it.
And
that's
so
what I have to say so far.
But as far as his journey, what about that journey did you think was something that you didn't anticipate knowing in terms of what he went through? What was illuminated in terms of his journey for you?
I think we knew a lot of it because he had shared it, but his personal experiences in childhood, he had not shared. His experiences with his family, he had not shared. And he really humanized himself for the people who were listening or reading his book. And, that's actually a really good tactic if you think about it, because people then recognize this is another person just like me, who has knowledge and is doing something about this topic. Maybe I too, with knowledge, can do something about the topic. So, he had people connect to him.
Inspired you in the way that you thought, okay, if he can, kind of the way like kind of Fravor inspired me. Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I actually felt like, of course, he had information that, but I feel like he went along a similar journey in terms of getting knowledge on this topic. When he described and how surprising that was, and sort of the shock about how much there was, right? That was like something I went through.
You're coming in and out, Deb. I'm maybe thinking.
Like, oh my
what
gosh,
do you think,
this
Nathan?
was written by really important people within the government. He went through that, and to.
Hey, Deb. Deb, can you hear me? Oh man, we lost her.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Deb, all right. What we'd like you to do is if you would restart your computer and then come back to the studio. And in the meantime, I know it's going to be difficult, but you'll miss my very, very incisive initial analysis of the book. But would you do that? Because we're losing you. Like right now.
Okay.
Restart. Thank you. Okay. See you in a bit. Nathan, as I said, sorry, I'm having trouble holding this one in.
That's all good.
The biggest surprise for me is finding out that Lou is a Jew, like me. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, everybody. You deserve something better.
That's DJ's takeaway.
That's my takeaway is that Lou is a Jew, like myself, and that he's talked about wearing a yarmulke and going to temple. So yeah, that's my. No, I'm just kidding.
Well, I mean, it's not a small point, particularly if you
Right.
have that shared background. I think that gives you another insight into his, his personality, what motivates him, the kind of culture that he grew up in to a certain degree. So yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of neat that he shared that with everybody.
And he said he said that he had previously said on podcasts that he was a man of I don't know if he said deep faith, but that he had faith. Am I couching that about right?
Yeah, I think that's about right. Yeah, he's referred to that he has a faith, but it's not necessarily a specific, religiosity, right?
Okay, yeah. So it was very surprising that Lou is a Jew. God bless you, Lou Mazel, my brother. So anyway, but no, I think to me, really what I saw was a lot of detail about how things went down that we didn't know. Like what he did was, in my opinion, is we had a lot of pieces of his story, and we also had a lot of suppositions that turned out to be correct. But what we didn't have is how the pieces came together. And he gave us some specificity on how those pieces were assembled from soup to nuts, basically from the beginning. And we supposed, what was it like when he left, and what was it like when he got there, and how long did he actually serve at the Pentagon? So a lot of those things, and then you spoke about last night when we were on the phone that he was the senior official that was part of the program. He was the ranking official, so that's why he would have referred to himself as the director. I mean, it's a reasonable thing to say because you're either, what are you? You're the branch chief. You're either flight chief, branch chief. You're that. You have to have some sort of title when you're the ranking person. So maybe director wasn't maybe on his performance report, but it was reasonable for him to assume that because he was in command. He probably palmed for the money. Program objective memorandum. That's where you basically ask for money. But in his case, I think he got money from Harry Reid, which was a roundabout way of getting, money rather than the palm. Because normally what would happen in the palm is if you're part of the Pentagon and you're starting a program like you, Nathan, they gave you the head of a program. And so you put together a budget with, your folks that run your team, probably similar to what you're doing now. And then you submit that budget. And then, like, for example, I'm just going to use AFSOC as an example just because that's what I know. Then within our branch or our function like A3T, they would look at it and say, okay, I just got 14 budgets. Of that, I like these 10. I think these 10 meet the priorities of the command and me. So those are going to then go up to the command level. And so then the command level, they're going to look at it and say, okay, of those 10 that you gave me, I like 8. And these others are going to fall below the cut line. They're going to be unfunded. There's another unfunded UFOs or unfunded requirements. Because you said, I have a requirement to study UAPs. I need to be able to have a travel budget to go and engage these different witnesses that have seen these. I need to be able to bring scientists in. I'm going to have so much budget to hire government civilians, but I also need to take the different pot of money and hire contractors because the budget won't allow me to staff 10 civilians, so I'm going to get, let's say, 6 civilians and 4 contractors or whatever, right? Whatever. So that's kind of how that would go. And so Lou probably didn't get that right off the bat, but he got money in it without having to go to announce to the Pentagon, hey, I need to palm for this UAP program. This is what we're doing.
Mhm.
So he went the back route. He went the yeah. So that's a POM. I think it's Program Objective Memorandum, and you can Google that, folks that are out there, for the POM. And everybody, the Army does it. Every Marine Corps, does it. Air Force, Space Force, we all do that stuff. So anyway,
Well, I'm glad you
yeah,
brought it up, because
yeah.
this is the line of questioning that I wanted to get into on
Sure.
the show tonight, and that's getting your experience with some of this part of the way the world works that I have no visibility to, and that's government funding of these kinds of programs, how the money is allocated or utilized, and then for someone with his access, with his tickets, right? That I've heard referred to like that. He's got access to all of these different kinds of sources of intelligence and differing systems within the Pentagon. We heard just last night on the Good Trouble show with Matt Ford. He had a guest on who had been a part of the UAPTF, and she was talking about there was a kind of a chat room, essentially, which I think you've mentioned to me before, where if you have a certain clearance, you can just get into this chat room, and anything that is of the same level of classification, then anybody can basically, partake in that kind of intelligence. If they have access to that chat room, they have access to the similar kind of intelligence that is permissible in that space. And so when I read the book and him kind of talking about how he is bootstrapping this program in the kind of period after OSAP and continuing in that effort, the image I have of him is really using the resources at his disposal, not necessarily financial, but the resources at his disposal because of his access to continue pursuing leads and collecting information and vetting information through the other analysts that are at his disposal. And so it's an unofficial sort of effort, but it still involves very official resources. So it's just interesting to me how that all works. And I was wondering if you could add some additional, kind of color to that, or if I got something wrong in what I was just explaining, please do correct me.
Well, which part? What's the sort of finite question there? If you were to form that into,
Yeah,
how did he?
I guess my question is it common or is it uncommon? Let's kind of go down this track.
Mhm.
Is it common or is it uncommon for someone of his seniority who has official program budgets and official responsibilities under the organization that he is reporting into? Is it common for those kinds of individuals to have other efforts that they get engaged in, whether they be efforts that they themselves are driving or that others may include them into? Like they may come, somebody from another program may come to you requesting intelligence, information, data sharing, whatever it may be. So how common is it that someone might have kind of an interest and efforts and resources and devotion to to programs that maybe are not exactly on the books, that are a little bit unofficial?
So this one is a little bit out of my wheelhouse because I haven't been read into things that are like, say, example, the programs that I was read into that were special access are programs that are known that they exist, but the details inside the program and the who, when, how, what, where, that's not known, but that the programs exist is known. These guys are involved in programs that are unacknowledged. Like he said that at one point, I believe he said when he talked to Semivan, it might have been, he said, this is the first person I've spoken to outside of our program that I admitted to, what we were doing. So this is a little, this is a little far afield. So I would say it's not that common, but he had to have been given a charge. Like he talked about that moron, Gary, what's his name? The guy who
Gary
was,
Reed.
yes, sexually, I don't know, harassing women and so forth.
Impropriety, yeah.
Yeah, sexual impropriety with subordinates and so forth. So he had to receive that charge from somebody. And then it was a question of where was he going to get funding from. In general, you have to be very specific about the money that you're asking for and what it's going to go to. Although I did hear I don't know if it was in Lou's book or one of the other folks say that there are SAPs that are funded where the Gang of Eight know that they're funding these SAPs and they don't know exactly what's going into them. And that's, that should be obvious to all of us because we all know that there are programs that are going on that nobody that's elected knows where that money is paying for it. So, you know what I mean? But Lou, obviously, now, the other thing you talked about additional duties. There are a lot of dudes like Dave Grush is an example where the UAP task force was an additional duty that he had that was stacked onto the NRO and the NGA places that he worked at and analyzed intelligence for. So that was an additional duty. And some of these other folks also on Lou's team, it may have been an additional duty as well. But it's something you do because, you want to be part of a team that's doing something important and you're going to apportion a part of your day to work on that stuff when you're in between your other stuff. And those guys were probably there, 10 hour a day at least, maybe more, maybe 12.
Right.
Lou said that he wasn't in particularly good health at that time. And I'll bet you that he was probably overweight. He was probably sitting behind a desk a lot. And now what you see is a sort of really healthy, trim Lou that looks like he's working out a lot because he's not sitting behind a desk for 12 hours a day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, did that answer it? I don't know.
No, it did. I mean, it's very helpful because, coming from the private industry where that's all I know is, you're on a team, you've got responsibilities, and you're doing those things, and that's just what you do. And the government world that he's describing, at least this was the impression I had, is that he's officially tasked to certain responsibilities and programs, but because of his level of access and expertise and professional experience, he also kind of gets brought into other efforts that aren't necessarily like officially printed somewhere, but they're efforts that are maybe kind of side projects or tangential projects to other official projects that he gets involved in. And so this ATIP effort, right, that was a program and then not a program, and there's been so much debate about that, kind of beating that horse to death. But the officialness of ATIP, I got the sense from the book that it was just very much kind of something that he was carrying the torch for. He was championing that in a kind of quasi-official capacity, not necessarily, something that was officially printed on letterhead, for example. And I just found that interesting.
Yeah, he didn't tell a lot of people about it. If he sought out intel, he wasn't telling them what they were working on. That became clear when he talked about how his meetings with Christopher Mellon, his meetings with Jim Semivan. So all these people that he probably sought intel, if there were sightings or data that were out there that were on some of these SharePoint sites or on SIPR or JWix, he gained access and looked at those things and then sought out those witnesses, but he didn't acknowledge to everybody. So it probably wasn't what they would call a program of record. Which is a program of record is when you're going up for the palm and you're palming for money for a program of record, except for what we talked about, those SAPs, that there are certain special access programs that not everybody in your command, that people know that you're going to palm for that, but they may not have the clearance to know what's involved in that.
I want to get to Deb, but that's another fascinating aspect of this to me, is that you can be someone nested within another hierarchical chain of command, and you might have access to some things that your superiors may not have access to. Like you might be read in on some projects that they're not, or working on something that not everybody in your in your decision tree is necessarily read in on. I find that interesting.
Yeah. Deb's thank you so much, bro, man. Let's get this super chat up here real quick from Space Oddities, the great David Bowie album. Go ahead, Nathan.
Yeah, so thank you, Space Oddities. So his book really sells the thought that there's not enough government oversight and transparency is needed. Yeah, I think that's 100% correct. He's beating that drum pretty loudly, and really ends the book with a call to action for folks to kind of raise the alarm about this. I mean, we heard even just as recently as earlier this week when, again, on Matt Ford's The Good Trouble show, he had Chris Mellon on, and Mellon was saying that even members of the Gang of Eight who are supposed to have been read in on these programs often just decline reading the entire program. Like they don't really want to know what these programs are doing. And so that is a huge oversight issue. If you've got the access and you're saying, I don't have the time to look at it, or I don't want to know what we're doing because I want to have deniability to what we're doing. These are serious problems. We're talking about a lot of money and public trust.
Yeah, I'm going to let Deb go because it's an extreme level of patriotism and courage. But go ahead, Debs.
Okay, so can you hear me okay?
Yes, ma'am. Woo!
Okay, I literally had to minimize stream so I cannot see you guys.
You can't?
As long as you can. No, because that was the only way to get the computer to stop wigging out. It's been freaking out since we started. That's okay. If the intelligence community wants to be on my computer with me, we can share. Anywho, so I have to go back to a couple things that I was excited to jump to. One was, this book also highlights that there is a lot more information that the government has, including videos, of course. And this has been said to us many times, but I'm glad that Mellon has also now come out and just straight said it, because at some point in the past, he had messaged that was one of his concerns. The government has so much more information. Why aren't they sharing it? So I'm excited that that's now out, that he's out there saying it too, along with Lou. That was part of some of his campaigning for this book. I'm also concerned about something Nathan was kind of hinting at about, when he's talking about how some of these things were done, as someone who isn't as familiar with specifically the Pentagon, right? Things like changing names and making it more vague so that you could get funding kind of like had me worried. And I'm okay to do.
Oh, we've lost Deb again.
It's a good question, though.
Go ahead.
I think DJ, maybe you can speak to this. The fact what she's saying is that it seemed concerning that some of these programs might be morphing into other efforts that may or may not be officially articulated somewhere or sanctioned. And how often does that happen? I mean, this is a good question just generally for the public to understand. If the Congress apportions money to a project and the Pentagon gets a big allotment of cash to spend on a project, how often is it that during the course of those activities, the scope of the project or the nature of the activities that are being performed, that those things might change from what they were assumed to be when they were initially stood up? I imagine that's kind of often, right? Because sometimes you just, you have a mission that you're given, and in the course of pursuing that and completing it, you realize, well, I've also got to do this and I have to do that, and now we have to change the nature of our strategy in order to achieve that goal.
This is really interesting. This is something that we need to earmark for when we have our next conversation with Lou. Is this specific question is, what is his understanding of how this funding is unfolding? How many of these, how much of funding for, say, Area 51? And so, you have an entire facility that's dedicated to secret projects. So within that pot of money, how many things are being done there that are funded, but that are unacknowledged? And that would be something that I would have to be happening. And how many SAPs are there that are unacknowledged that the Gang of Eight knowingly funds? And then the question would be, how many SAPs are funded that they don't know about? And that's a question that we would have to ask to Jim, we would have to ask to Dave Grush, or we would have to ask to Lou. But it's obviously going on, especially when you have some very, very expensive facilities. And we have a pretty darn good idea of some of the things that have happened there and at those facilities. And we're pretty sure that that Congress is not aware of that they're funding all of those programs.
Mhm.
So some of those programs they're probably aware that they're funding, because obviously we have a runway there, we have air traffic control, we have basically building on base, because some of the people don't go home every night. Some people go and they'll stay for 4 days a week or 5, and then they'll go home on the weekends. Some people come back and forth every day. So there's a lot of cost in running a facility like that, and obviously legislators are aware of that. But the question is, how many programs are going on there that they're funding that they're not aware of? And that we would have to ask to somebody with a little more insight than myself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, all that discussion aside, I mean, I wanted to get into that because I am fascinated by just kind of the inner workings of the Pentagon and these kinds of programs. And it does connect with, I think, a lot of people's questions around the official capacity of these programs like OSAP and ATIP, and, who ran them and what mandates were they given or not given to do, whatever they were doing. So it's an interesting conversation. But to get into the book kind of more specifically, he takes the reader through, really kind of his own journey, I think. But he begins the book early on talking about this incident that we've heard about in Brazil, this Colares incident.
Colares.
And it's one of those UFO stories that is really quite alarming. What I found interesting is just the stories he chose to include in the book and those that he didn't include in the book. And I guess the Colares one kind of checked a couple boxes for him. One, that it demonstrated that there is a potential capacity to do harm, whether or not these entities or whatever they are actually have ill intent to human beings just broadly is an open question, but clearly they have the ability to do so, to harm people. There's no mention in the book of the aerial school incident, which wasn't like that at all. The children in Zimbabwe basically saw the craft and had a pretty benign interaction with it, and it left a big mark on their lives just in terms of psychologically and whatnot. But certainly no physical harm was done to the children during that incident, and that's not mentioned in the book. Of course, there are many other examples that we could provide that were or not included in this story, but Colares fits really well with, I think, the underlying theme of a lot of why he's raising the alarm, is that we need to take this seriously because we don't want to be caught basically with our pants down if something bad happens, and then we have to tell the American public, yeah, well, we kind of knew about this, but we didn't really want to. We didn't want to share this information with you. We didn't want to share information with our best scientists.
You weren't mature enough.
Yeah, we would be. We were hoping it would just kind of go away and not be an issue. And he's saying that's not an acceptable stance for the government to take. So yeah, I want to come back to Deb on that. I mean, Deb, this kind of speaks just to the overall theme of the book. What is your take on that approach to the UFO topic broadly, that he's kind of claiming this, potential threat narrative? What are your thoughts on that?
Deb?
I don't know if we have.
Deb. We've lost Deb.
Yeah.
Deb,
So
Deb,
okay. No, I'm here-ish. Like I'm battling the strange computer issue, but I'm here. So I think this is actually one of the things I keep going back to. The fact that we're talking about there are things in our airspace and in our water, and we don't know what they are, and we don't know who they're from. And the people who argue like UFOs are nonsense, So believe that if you want, but do you care about our
It's absurd.
safety? Do you care about knowing what's going on around us? Do you care about our national security? Because if you do, they're doing the right thing with this. And I think this is more Mellon's stance too, actually, like really pushing that. We need to be prepared for whatever this could be. Now, I do think Luz sort of addresses this as this looks to me like sort of like they're doing something a little sketchy here. Okay. They're like hanging around our military, they're hanging around our nuclear assets, right? Either way, yes, there's now a motorcycle going by. Either way, like that is a huge part of this. And anytime someone's trying to stop them from doing that, from trying to find out what's going on, I'm like, don't you care about national security? I can't believe they don't. So yeah, I am okay with the threat narrative.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and DJ, what do you think about that? Is the threat narrative the right place to start in getting this conversation kind of off the ground with the wider public?
Well, before I answer that, I just want to say to everybody in the chat, we have you starred, and after me, we'll get to and we'll read your chats. So thank you for putting those there. And also thank you, Space Oddities, for that $20 blessing. That is awesome. This is going to be the first year that Cab, with all our software, pays for itself. Thanks to you guys. So it's going to be great because we've been footing the bill for the last 3 years. Anyway, okay. So I don't know if it's necessarily the place to start, but I think it's if we're in a pizza pie, it would be a slice of the pie, and then we can sort of debate on what size the pie should be. And Lou spoke about that in there, and he used to use the analogy of you saw muddy footprints when you came down from sleeping. And we've also talked about ISR, and this is something you'd hear on Nathan's show and on Nathan's show with Exo Academian Liminal Frames, is that we'll often we'll anthropomorphize the intention of UFOs, and we'll say, okay, they must be doing this because we as humans look at it this way, so we're going to take that and we're just going to copy that and paste that onto UFO intention, when in fact, in most, if not all cases, but most cases, we have no idea what they're thinking and what their intention. But he talks about the way that they have moved in certain areas, and how they've reacted to certain things that we did, and that it's clear that they're performing ISR. And this could be maybe the only, and I've struggled with this throughout the history of CAB, that this could be the only place where when you look at intelligence, reconnaissance, and surveillance, that something that's moving, that has senses, that can sense who you are, what you are and what you're doing, and then react to you, the very bare minimum, we can interpret that is a form of ISR. And I'm comfortable, that may be the only place that I'm comfortable ascribing something that we do as humans to them. It's what the Kalara situation that it became aggressive and showed, as Nathan, when you were talking about, that is something, and Deb, you also spoke about it, something we have to pay attention to, because we can't assume that all of them are friendly. As much as one of us may have had an experience that was benign and was maybe pleasant and was maybe inspiring, like Exo's experiences, right? That doesn't mean that they're all like that. And you have to, that. It's just like people will say they'll see Bigfoot and they'll say, oh, I saw Bigfoot. People say that they're brown, but the one I saw clearly had red hair. Oh, well, and had a round head as opposed to the conical head. Okay, so does that mean they all have to look like that because the one you saw had an ape-like face and a conical head and had brown hair? Or is it possible that there's a different kind of a Bigfoot that looks different and has a more human face and so forth? Some of them look very Native American. So same goes for UFOs. We can assume that some of them are very friendly, and we believe that because we have spoken with credible individuals that have had experiences that have been inspiring. James Indoli has never had a bad experience, but he is open to the possibility that somebody else has had experiences that aren't like his. James has a great perspective on this. So let's read some of these chats real quick, and then we can follow up. But these people have been so kind. So Eli is it McInnes? Okay, Debs, you gonna read, or Nathan? What do you want to do here?
I defer to Deb.
I can try. I can try.
Yes.
I can see the
You're
screen.
a great
right now.
reader.
Okay. He also points out that government shouldn't be in control of the entire conversation on UAP.
I'd say that's his entire mission in leaving the government.
Yeah.
That was his whole point. What we have here, Nathan.
Yeah. So from Space Oddities, from what Lou says, it is more than just the earmarked money, but in black projects, the sky is the limit. There is no limit to what they spend. Yeah, this is, again, the allegations that we've heard from people like Lou and David Grush is that there's just a lot of money flowing into these programs. No one knows how much money is there. The Pentagon can't pass an audit. Where's all the money going? And everyone has heard stories of government waste in terms of the $300 hammer or whatever it might be. These kinds of things do happen. It's the responsibility of our elected officials in our republic to keep tabs on this kind of spending. And if we've got a situation where even known programs are going way over budget, and we're funding them in perpetuity just with a blank check, like that, this really isn't something that is tenable from a long-term financial stability standpoint. So it's a huge concern, let alone if we're talking about funding reverse engineering, crash retrieval, clandestine activities that our elected officials have no idea that these things are being committed in the name of the United States or the United States interests, or private industry having access to materials and contracts that that no one knows about, and having that technological advantage over their competitors. And there's a whole host of issues that are brought up around this kind of extreme secrecy under UAP. So a really, really valid point.
Someone can fact check me on this, but at one point they had said that our defense budget alone was higher than the next 17 countries after us. So somebody fact check me on that, because I could be wrong, or that information could be dated. Lou also mentioned funds being misappropriated for intended program. Yes. Due to wording in bills. Yeah. And this is what I was alluding to, Eli, but again, I have to defer when it's a dude like Lou. That's what I thought. I had said to the cabbies a couple of years ago, I said that they're signing off on these bills, and they're naming the bill, they're naming the funding, the program this, but it's actually funding that. That's the only way I could see that they're doing it. And apparently Lou, if you're quoting Lou there, that must be what has happened, because there's, how many unacknowledged SAPs can you have where before congressmen beyond the Gang of Eight would say, hey, WTF, what's going on here? Here's a one for you, Debs.
From our lovely Julie, if you have telekinesis or poltergeist activity, then you should really try to not get highly emotional during those flare times. IMO, also known as in my opinion.
Yeah, that must be something you guys have been talking about in the chat. Let me know star something else if you see something else here's something from Benji. Let's get to Benji. Question for DJ. With your experiences and perspectives from USAF, what are the chances that these are indeed Russian, Chinese, Iranian, or enemy aircraft? Info and gap. So yeah, I've spoke about this extensively. It depends on. I can't, paint with a broad brush, but I can say that craft that are displaying one of these observables, I've said in conversations, hundreds of times with cabbies and on air, that I don't believe that technology has been that technology, to the extent that Hal Puthoff obviously has drawn up something that makes sense and has, drew all those equations on the board. I believe that's the case, that there may be an understanding of how they're doing it, but actualizing that and being able to create that and then being able to fly that, I think, is a completely different strata. And I don't think that the craft that are displaying these 5 or 6 observables are something that is human made at this point. I think there may be replicas that look like that they may use for different reasons, but I don't believe these silent craft are moving around and doing the things that Lou described in that long dissertation, which was very fascinating, that he went through with Hal. So that's my opinion, and I'm pretty comfortable in that one. Nathan, go ahead, take it away. Or Debs.
And let's, in addition to
I'm losing you, Debs.
Opinion.
Yeah, I didn't quite catch it all there, Deb.
Yeah, I'm going to minimize again and see if that works. But I just don't know how many times we have to hear someone say it. Like the same thing, that these are not human made. Like these are professionals who work around this topic, and they're literally paid, and they to look at these human made objects constantly, and every facet. There's like every facet of the government, the military, professional, civilians.
Deb, we're losing you, but just to carry that point forward, there's an anecdote in there where Lou talks about bringing in aerospace guys. I think he doesn't say who they brought in, but they brought in people like from Skunk Works type folks. And when they showed them what they were looking at, they were like, yeah, man, that's not, guys that are working on the next generation of aircraft that I don't know about them. I don't know what they are. That those are the type of stuff that's tested at Area 51. And also he spoke about the test range. Remember I said to people, they're flying these UAPs all over suburban Virginia and Des Moines, Iowa. And it's like, and Lou said, yeah, we have test ranges, hundreds of miles of test ranges. We do that. We don't run those tests. And he explained it exactly like I explained it to you guys. You are taking a risk. If you take a UAP and if you take one of these craft and you fly it against a fighter squadron that doesn't know it's coming, somebody can be killed very, very easily. I mean, we just lost CV-22 guys over there in Japan that crashed into the ocean. I mean, it is a huge, huge deal when you have a Class A mishap. And God forbid that you do that in a test when there's no reason to do that, because these tests are very, Nathan, you're a methodological kind of a dude, and test, when you do flight test, and you bring a group in and you sit everybody down in these briefing rooms and you guys go through months to produce these test cards, everything is scripted. These are the and you give those folks, these are the test cards we're running today. This is what we're looking for. This is the outcome. Let us know what you see based on these test cards. So after you do your after takeoff checklist, I want you to pick up these test cards. We're going to say fights on, and then you guys are going to start going through those cards and only those cards. And when we finish those cards, you come and land, and now we're going to debrief for 5 times longer than you just flew, right, to talk about what you saw, what was the SIGINT, all the different things. So it's a very, very scripted event, and it builds and gets more and more complex. I've only done it, I think once in my whole career was I part of something like that. Once. I mean, there are dudes that do that. That's like their job. I was kind of like a fill-in, if you will. Anyway, that's how test goes. It's not something like, hey, let's go fly the Tic Tac in there and see what these 2 Navy F-18 folks do. Because Fravor could have hit that, and he actually tried to at one point. He pointed his aircraft at it. That could have been fatal.
Yeah.
So, yeah, anyway, that's...
Yeah, no, I completely agree. But I've watched a couple of YouTube videos on engineering and aeronautics, and I feel like I'm kind of a specialist now
Yeah.
about these things.
There you go, man. You ready to? We're gonna get Nathan over to the flight test squadron at Eglin, and you're gonna be running the next test, man. Let's
I mean,
go.
I'm just,
Let's do it.
that's the absurdity though that we're dealing with. Is that
Yeah.
everyone's got all this information at their fingertips, and so there's the illusion of knowledge and expertise that we can gain through very, very minimal effort. And when you think about, what Malcolm Gladwell referenced, the 10,000 hours, people are familiar with that. 10,000 hours of doing something to become an expert at that thing. Is it a hard and fast rule? No, but it's a pretty good approximation. And if you've been doing anything for 10,000 hours professionally or personally, if that's, maybe you're an exercise fan or something, if you've been doing it for that long, you do develop some expertise in that, and you do know how to do certain things way better than others do. And people come to you. In fact, they pay you for that expertise, right? And so I just get I get exhausted when we continue to have more and more individuals who have been close to this information, who have been trained in accessing and understanding and analyzing this kind of data and coming to the same kinds of conclusions. And we hear those conclusions over and over again. And then, the folks from the internet just saying, well, yeah, I mean, I think that they just don't know what they're talking about. And it's all just it's a circular reporting, and it's all fantasy fireside stories that they just like telling each other. Like, if that's how the government works, where all of these paid professionals, thousands of hours, millions of dollars of training goes into these individuals' lives, and they're all just kind of winging it because they sort of believe certain things. Like, it's just not how the world works, folks. I'm sorry. So anyway, that rant aside, what I was very interested in this book that I wasn't necessarily expecting was Lou talking about his personal experience with remote viewing. So that's one thing I didn't think he would speak to directly in the book, even though it had long been rumored that he had experience as a remote viewer. Two, he brought up the orbs in his house. So he's had a very personal, close, upfront contact with something anomalous in his own home. His wife saw it. His daughter saw it. So we've got his word that he saw these things. And we've also been introduced in this conversation that it hasn't necessarily come forward before, other than through things that David Grush has alluded to, and that are things like abduction and human experimentation or implants. These are topics that he brought up in the book that I think if we were to rewind a few years ago, we would not have expected to see that in a book from someone like Luis Elizondo. And that tells me this is where we are now in the conversation, that he's much more comfortable talking about these kinds of things. Because if anyone has watched his podcasts in the past, he wouldn't touch these subjects. He wouldn't go near them. But now he's openly talking about them in the book. So I wanted to get y'all's thoughts on that part of it.
Deb, first of all, let me just say one thing to Benji. If you would restate the question that you have up there, I've starred those two. If you would just restate that, we'll get that answered for you. And Debs, you talked about Lou and hey, good night, Anon ET. Thank you for stopping by. I appreciate you. Bon appetit. Deb, you've talked about Lou and remote viewing years ago.
Yeah, it was something that kind of showed up in a previous book about the OSAP program, that Lou had kind of revealed that he had done some remote viewing at that dinner that he also mentions in his book, where he met a whole bunch of people. They didn't say in the OSAP book, which I believe is Skinwalkers at the Pentagon. They didn't mention the general coming to talk to them about the Brazilian cases, Colares. But they did talk about his remote viewing. And I think that people forget that people can have their own other paranormal experiences, and everyone does, by the way. Just about everybody has a paranormal experience at some point. And they can have their own spiritual beliefs and their own religious beliefs and all those things. And it's still separate from their expertise on this subject, in my opinion. But yes, it has been revealed before that he could remote view.
Yeah, he has clearly he saved that for his book. He's been asked about it before, and he declined to answer that question. And the guy is, it was really interesting. He said a lot of people say that I'm a conspiracy theorist, I'm this and that. And he said, I'm a scientist. How many of you guys have degrees in scientists? I was getting a medical science degree in advance of possibly going to med school. So, but he said that, and it seems like he was very intelligent to hold certain things back for his book, which brought a huge amount of anticipation amongst us and the public for his book. And you got to see, I think this is kind of what I'm thinking about, Nathan, is you got to see his vulnerability in him talking about his childhood and being picked on, and when he decided to fight and stand up for himself. He spoke about the frailty he went through with his wife and coming home and telling his wife what he did and that he quit, and how his daughter supported him. He also came what makes him feel heroic, his time in combat, his titles as special agent, him being willing to put himself in the target, in the sort of in the sights of Islamic terrorists by going interviewing down at Guantanamo. So he takes you through his successes, his failures, his frailties, where he felt he had charge, where he felt he had no charge, and he was sort of given to the whims of those above him. And he basically took you through everything. You got to see, I think, a 360-degree Lou, in my opinion. Family man, everything. Father.
Yeah, I agree. A pretty comprehensive perspective on the man, his career, his motivations, all that kind of thing. I found it. We talked about the remote viewing, and I found it interesting. He shares the anecdote of where he was brought in to talk to Jim Lukatsky, that first time, and Lukatsky's kind of asking him, "What do you think about UFOs?" And he's like, "Well, I don't think about them at all. I've got my focus on these other things." And what I'm interested to know from from Lou himself, from his personal experience, what was his own journey like, going from being someone who before that moment had experience with something like remote viewing that, very publicly people would say this is paranormal, woo-woo stuff, but he clearly had been trained in that, and he himself believed and believes that it works. So he was that kind of person when he met Jim Lukatsky. And then, here Lukatsky is kind of like pulling the curtain back even further and saying, well, keep an open mind about UFOs. Like, I just wonder from Lou's own personal journey, what that's been like to go from kind of these successive kind of mind-bending reality changes. It's quite interesting and weird too, that in my opinion, that he didn't necessarily make room for UFOs, even though he'd already made room for remote viewing. I understand, certainly how that could be, but it's interesting to me that he, just never really thought about them. So yeah, I wonder what you guys thought about that. How do you think his remote viewing experience and the training and his experience just with remote viewing has impacted his journey into the UFO UAP topic?
Well, that's hard to say right there as far as how it impacted. But what I can say is that he said that he didn't think about UFOs, which is not saying that he wasn't necessarily open. And by the way, Benji and George, we're going to get to both of your questions after. We're going to get to both of your questions after this. But I don't know that he was closed off to the idea. He just said, I don't think about him, which we could say about, you could probably say that about everyone in your office. They might be like, I don't think about it. I don't know if you've had the discussions at work. So I don't know that he seems like the type of guy that's open to listening and hearing before he just runs his mouth that something's not real or it's fake. He doesn't seem like he's that type of guy. I think it's just something that he didn't think about. And the interesting thing he said about remote viewing is he said he felt that any of us could do it. Debs.
He also talked about the science behind it. and he tried to explain it in scientific terms, which is something that he's applied to the UAP topic as well. He's trying to understand it in the nuts and bolts terms. So obviously there's more to UAP than that, but you can see that that's not his wheelhouse with it. So with remote viewing, he's explained it as basically being quantum, and it tries to that's not necessarily so much in the book, but just from conversations he's had about remote viewing, he's tried to explain it in scientific terms. So I think that's where those two connect for him. Like he's like, this is something that other people don't understand, but there could be science that can explain it, and this is the science that I think explains it. And it's the same thing for him with UAP. But I have to agree with, there are lots of things that we don't think about and focus on. So it's not like a big deal for him to not have been paying attention to UAP. Like, I don't think about penguins. Like,
Yeah.
ever.
Now you are. I'm thinking about them right now. I mean, Deb, you bring up just your point is spot on, right? And I think this goes to something that is attributed to Lou and maybe attributed to him unfairly, and that's that, because he has some knowledge about UFOs, he has all the knowledge about UFOs, right? And I think this book and your comment there demonstrate that that's not the case, that just like the rest of us, he comes at this subject from a particular perspective, his own unique background, his framework of understanding reality, and he's interpreting and is actively still trying to interpret this phenomena through that lens of understanding. So, he was trained as a scientist and went through undergrad experience as a scientist, and he went through the military as an analyst, and all these kinds of skill sets that he brought. Well, why wouldn't he be using those skill sets and those frameworks to understand what this might be? Now, then the question becomes are those frameworks actually helpful to understanding what this might be? And I think that is the open question. That's why we need more folks from different disciplines, different walks of life, different perspectives, all working together to try to understand this, because it may be that just this kind of one kind of approach, traditional type of approach to understanding, isn't going to be adequate enough to really get to the bottom of what this is.
Clearly he wants to understand it from electromechanical, physical standpoint. He also, and you guys would have to help me with this quote. That quote is that, magic is just something that we just don't understand yet. You know what I mean? He understands that our science may or may not explain it, but he wants to try to explain it, but he doesn't have the hubris to think that our physics can explain everything they can do. He just thinks that that Hal Puthoff may have figured out how they do it. And that's that's good, and there may be all other aspects of them from an electrical, mechanical, physical, aeronautical perspective that they haven't figured out yet. But they've figured out the part about how they, or I shouldn't say they figured it out. They think they understand how they're able to move and the time dilation and all the sort of things that happen inside the craft, so that they don't get smushed when they accelerate at something that should destroy a human body. So he's very. The other thing that's interesting about the guy is whenever he talks about colleagues, whether it's Steve Justice or Gary or Jim or any of these people, he always acts like they're significantly smarter than he is. I got news for you, man. This guy is really smart, because he's open to being wrong, and he wants to know, and he doesn't paint himself as an expert in any of these things that he discusses. He basically says that he's like a sponge trying to learn about it. Let's get to some of these questions. I'm going to read the first one. We'll go to Nathan and then Debs. So, all right, Benji, brother, something was brought up to me from an employee at Northrop. What if they have to fly the crafts to the test ranges on occasion, but we don't have any crafts like that? All I can say about that, Benji, is I don't know the types of craft they have. So each craft would have to be individual. Now, if you're talking about they, meaning they, and why they seem to show up in Nevada, like Jason Sands, who, by the way, I had a great phone conversation with Jason Sands not too long ago. We can get him on the show. Like what he saw and others have seen out at Area 51. Richard, what's his name again? Help me. Rick Doty has had sightings out there when he was out there with the OSI. So I don't know if you mean those craft. As far as craft that are mimics, I mean, I'd have to, each case we'd have to look at individually, see it, hear it, watch it, see its characteristics, and then we could talk about, is this something that is being flown by another intelligence or being operated, or something that's being operated by humans? And do we know that humans can operate it? I don't know that. I don't know that they can't. I just, there's a lot of mental gymnastics that have to happen in terms of what you would have to think to tell the craft for it to interpret. And there's just more questions than we have answers. But great question. Let's get to George. Go ahead, Nathan, please.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, George. So Lou said in an interview on Toe that he doesn't meditate and he drinks too much coffee. Remote viewing requires meditation, does it not? Yeah, it's a good question. I think there aren't any hard, there aren't any hard rules about how to remote view, per se. I think there are guidelines. There are, we certainly have certain practitioners who say that if they do certain things, they get better results by, not drinking coffee or getting good sleep or whatever it is. They have their own kind of, pre-remote viewing, pre-flight checklist, if you will, that they go through that they have found to be successful. But I think that's in many ways, just like an athlete has a pregame ritual. These are things that help them get dialed into the zone that they need to be in to perform at the level they want to perform at. And I don't think it has to be a hard and fast rule that, you don't drink alcohol or don't meditate to be able to remote view more successfully. I could, maybe that will one day be proven scientifically to our satisfaction. But in my experience with people who do this, I don't think it's a hard and fast rule per se. And we also don't know that maybe when he was doing it, he was doing less of those activities.
Could I counter that a little bit? Also,
yes, please. Yeah. Yes, please.
What kind of meditation? Because there are multiple, and not all of them are as straightforward as sitting and humming or listening to the Monroe Institute tapes. There's actually quite a huge variety, including just the act of driving is a form of meditation for some people. So, sorry, just had to throw that out there, because if you look into the brainwave stuff, there's several types.
Yeah.
I agree with you, Deb. I think there, from the little that I know of the meditation modalities I know about, and the little that I've heard of remote viewers talk about, it's a little bit of a different headspace because you're more engaged. You're looking around the room. You're writing on a piece of paper, whereas a lot of forms of meditation are about clearing your mind of anything and create. And I'm sure, Nathan, you've talked about it with Darren ad nauseum. So
I'm shaking my head no, because the best one is actually analyzing something. The ones that the Shaolin monks use to reach the gamma state in their brain, they're analyzing things. They're not trying to clear their mind at all. They're focusing on a problem. So
there you go. Then there you go.
Yeah.
Many different. So you're going to read this one, Deb. So keep your singing voice on for this one.
How do you feel about Lou using remote viewing as cruel and unusual punishment on a detainee at Guantanamo? Is this not against the Geneva Convention? Should I answer this one first, or you guys want to?
Yeah, go ahead, and I'll come in after.
So
go ahead,
I first of all, I'm not sure that they thought that actually would work. First of all, second of all, they presented as people standing near the bed. I don't know if that's exactly cruel and unusual. People have dreams like that. I don't think that they consider those dreams to be cruel and unusual. I think this is a little bit worded a little harshly. So what do you guys think?
The Geneva Conventions, I don't think, addresses something like remote viewing. There are some very specific things that can be done in captivity and can't be done. And so, yeah, I think there are certain types of detainment that have unfolded that I would say would violate the Geneva Conventions, and they were not, let's say, enemy combatant to, like, so there are different rule sets when you're captured as a card-carrying military member by another card-carrying military. Then, and I've been through training for that. I've been through peacetime detention, like if you're kidnapped. I've also been through if you're kidnapped by a terrorist group and what that might look like and what might you have to exercise in order to survive that environment. And all three of those are different because the goals of all three are different. And the rule sets, in some cases, there's no rules. But I believe they probably, at Guantanamo, I think that they were operating under the Geneva Conventions, which means no, waterboarding and no putting people wet in a very cold room and these kinds of things. So I think I don't know that Lou engaged in that, but that would be something that we could potentially ask him if he comes on. Nathan.
Yeah, I think this particular part of the book definitely raised some eyebrows from readers that, one, he put this in writing that this is something that he and other colleagues did, and that it seemed to have the intended effect that they wanted, which was really kind of change the intent or perspective of this particular individual and what they were planning to do or wanting to do harm to the United States or its interests or whatever. I think you can have ethical qualms with it. I don't see, I could totally understand people that would have an ethical issue with the use of what amounts to kind of a psychotronic warfare technique in this instance. And I could see someone taking issue with that. And I understand why they would take issue with it. Is it a violation of an individual's autonomy and personal sovereignty? It certainly absolutely could be perceived that way. So, I do think it raises some questions. I think people, again, I've said this many, many times. I said to DJ last night, people have elevated Lou Elizondo so much that he's in many ways kind of become this untouchable person from critique by his most ardent supporters. He's like kind of the third rail of ufology. You don't want to touch it because you'll get electrocuted if you raise any kind of critique of Elizondo. But I don't think he's asking for that himself. If you hear him talking in his interviews, he says, I'm not perfect.
He's definitely not.
Yeah, he's I'm not perfect. I don't want to be doing this forever. I've made mistakes. I don't think that he is asking people to hold him to a standard that he himself can't actually achieve. So it's I wish we would stop doing that. I think that it's okay for people to have legitimate, rational concerns about things that Lou Elizondo has said or done. I think it's okay to have those perspectives. It's okay to talk about those things. I don't need to denigrate someone for having those perspectives. Everyone's got a right to their own opinion. If you kind of flip that and go on the attack onto somebody, well, then I take that from a different perspective. I think that it's one thing to have opinions about something, but it's another thing to go after somebody aggressively and kind of hound them or harass them for their particular behavior that you just so happen to disagree with. These are matters that maybe aren't necessarily for us to decide, quite frankly.
He said was listening last night on the way back from work, and he said in the book, he said, I am not okay with people attacking others on my behalf. That is not attacking someone, their family is not okay, and I don't want people to do that on my behalf. He was very clear about that. I'm going to answer this one for George, and this is the problem that we run into, George, and we've talked about this many, many times on this show. People will have an opinion about somebody like Lou, and they're going to look for information that they don't believe him, they don't trust him, and they're going to look for any sliver of information that supports the thought that they already have about the guy? How can I find something that supports that this guy is a liar who's not who he says he is? And I'm going to look for any mistake that he's made. And I will tell you, Joe Rogan has found this out. When you are talking for 3 hours a week for 14 going on 15 years, you are going to make some gaffes and say some things, and you're going to go home and you're going to go like this, and your wife is going to go like that to you and go, man, you really screwed up and said something stupid, and you really just ran your mouth too much. My wife could walk in here right now and do that with me with the amount of shows that I've done, and she'd be right. The thing what you need to understand about Lou is, regardless of what you think about the guy, and if you have doubts about him, the guy quit his job making a lot of money and security and retirement and 401k that he could still be working there now. This dude is younger than me, and I'm still working. He could still be there now and just increasing his retirement every year that he goes on. He's been gone since 2017, man. He's lost a lot of money over this. And when he tells you, I was on this damn program, this UFO program, I don't care what Lukatsky says. He was part of a UFO program, and Harry Reid said it, and other people that he mentions in the book have substantiated that he was part of this program. Whatever, I don't care what you want to acronym you want to put to it. He was a GS-15, which is as high as you can go in the general service scale. He was a GS-15 in charge as the lead guy in this program. Nathan said maybe he didn't have the title of director. Maybe that wasn't written down anywhere because it was an unacknowledged program. A program that wasn't even a program of record. But he was part of this UFO program, obviously. You've heard that from Fravor. You've heard it from Cahill. You've heard it from PJ. You've heard it from Alex. Yep, we went there and we talked to Lou. Well, how do you think that happened? How many?
Hal Puthoff. Let's not forget Hal Puthoff.
I mean, there's so many. I mean, Jim Semivan, you know, director of field operations for the CIA, for goodness sakes. He is who he says he is, and he was part of the program, a UFO program. And I couldn't care less what the name of it is or was. It's not material to the discussion. And now, if I tell you something and you choose not to believe me, I invite you not to believe me, because I have not put my future on the line for UFOs, nor will I ever, because I don't have the courage that Elizondo has or Dave Grush has like that. Combat courage, sure. Go to war and go on deployments. I've been on 12 of them, and some of them I didn't even have a uniform on. No problem with that. But the courage to give up my livelihood over UFOs, I am not doing it. I don't have that courage of conviction like those dudes do. They did it, and that's why you should believe Elizondo. That he at least was ahead of a UFO program. Whatever the letters are that constructs it is completely immaterial and not helpful to understanding who he is, what he did, and why we can have the discussion that Nathan said that we can have now that we could not have had he not done that, along with Christopher Mellon. We could not have had these discussions. We would still be in the quote UFO closet, not talking about this at work. I talked about it at work the other day. And these guys know where I work.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you made a really passionate plea and excellent points that are worth reiterating, and we owe Lou Elizondo a debt of gratitude. Is he a perfect person? No, no, he's not. And keep in mind, we've got a lot of we're talking about shadowy UFO programs. We're not talking about they're in the plain light of day. Lots of people know about them. They're highly recorded and documented. A lot of these things are not well documented even. They're kind of kept off the books in many regards. So, it doesn't surprise me that we've got some, sort of different narratives in print that kind of conflict with each other. Would I like it to be clear? Absolutely. I've read those books and I've had the same questions. I'm like, wait a minute, this book said this and this one said that, and which one is right and which one was the right order. And there are historians who are going to kind of sort that out and answer those kinds of questions. But I think to DJ's point, he's got SITG, skin in the game.
Put your money where your mouth is. I'm listening.
Right. He's been out there more than anybody. And, and he's taking hits every time he goes out. It's not like everybody's like, great, Lou, he's taking hits every time, he's kind of in the crosshairs of a lot of hate and doubt and whatnot, but he keeps coming back. So I think that says a lot about his character. It's just not easy to do. And look, I'm applauding him in this regard, but I also, I have personal, concerns too. Like, again, my point is we're all that way. Human beings are complicated. Let's give each other the space to be complicated. You allow yourself to be complicated. Let's allow others to be complicated. I think that's only fair.
I have to say it, and I think other people have missed this, but he had to protect OSAP when he first came out. He couldn't use.
He didn't say OSAP.
Right, he couldn't use
or Lukatsky
because it wasn't unclassified, and he still had to consider his security clearances, and he was trying to keep that. So there are certain things that he was curtailing for the public, and probably still is. So,
yeah, I figured out last night. I did some math and figured out loosely. Nathan and I, we went over some of the numbers. He lost about $1.4 million in salary since he left. He's obviously recouped some of that, but he said that we know what his salary was, and he mentioned that when he went to work for To the Stars Academy, that it was a lot less than what he was making. So I'm going to guess, I'm going to throw a number at you that is based on nothing. It's probably $100,000. They probably offered those guys $100,000 each. And that is well below what an SES would have made in Christopher Mellon. I have no idea what the pay scale at the CIA, but it's probably similar. You're a government employee. It's probably similar to what Christopher Mellon was making. And Lou obviously was making about $190,000 a year in that area gross. So yeah, he probably lost about $1.4 million and then recouped maybe half that. So I don't know. Anyway, great points, guys. What else we got before we close things down for the evening?
Yeah, I mean, I want to just maybe we wrap here by kind of getting our thoughts on whether or not we think this book has helped push the conversation, forward. And I'd like to hear from Deb. Deb, what do you think about that? What's the reaction?
I feel like it's very hard when you know all of the data that's in a book to say this could make a big difference. Like I feel like I already knew a lot of what was in this book. The only thing I didn't really know was his personal history related to his family. He was very careful about using cases that were in the public eye rather than disclosing classified cases. You may have noticed that. And of course, because of the community and the research that we do, we knew about all those cases that he mentioned. So I feel like as far as going, oh, that's brand new news, that didn't happen. But as far as, hey, I was the guy working with, these government programs and trying to get this information to the public, that could be relatable to people who are not familiar with these cases. And that might bring some more people into wanting to know more. I think what I'm waiting for is what most people who are in a similar situation to myself, I'm waiting for people who I'm not going to tell about the book to tell me about the book. Like my family. If they pick up on it and they start talking about it, then I'll be excited. And I'm just waiting for it. I want to see if that makes a shift. I'd like to see that.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mentioned before that he brought up some things in the book that I didn't expect him to bring up, and I think that that is a signal that it reflects that we are moving into a place where the stigma is a lot less than it was a few years ago, and that we're and you're seeing that in the media appearances that he's been making as well. When he's going on these morning shows and stuff, and he's talking with the folks for 30 seconds or whatever it is, he doesn't have much time to talk with them. But the reaction is much more one of fascination, of curiosity, of I wish we had more time to talk to you about this. I mean, one of the hosts I recall saying, I always knew this was true. I always believed that this was true. So you're getting more, I think, public reaction that is positive, that this is something that is very likely to be true. We've heard recently that he might be at one of the UFO hearings that is reported to be coming up later this month. That would be really quite interesting. People have been dying to get him, in front of Congress publicly to hear what he has to say. I do think this is moving the needle, but look, the needle movement it's not like one of those things where it just kind of jumps forward and all of a sudden, we've had this monumental shift. I think this is just a part of that gradual movement where this continues to, seed into the public consciousness, the public awareness, and Lou, is leading the charge in that regard. He's putting his neck out there and he's going for it. So I think it's big. Maybe not as big as many of us would have hoped. We would have hoped for maybe some new awesome stories that we had never heard before. Like you said, Deb, we're not getting that kind of thing. But from a public facing standpoint, I think it's a really, really solid effort.
And unfortunately, I'm going to have to go dark before I go light again. But so, George, you can see here, it's what I said earlier, is that you're looking for information that's going to support what you already think about Lou. So the math doesn't even work out to him being worth that much. Like in terms of what he would have made as a retired major and what he would have made in government service, it would be really, and with 2 children, going to school and a wife and living in where did he live, in Maryland? I think he lived in Maryland.
Kent Island.
Thank you, love. I know it's like a beautiful place to amass 26.2 million. But if you're watching idiots like Manny that did a 3-hour documentary on Lou, or Jimenez or Green Street, and these morons that just want to, again, people that have no skin in the game, right? Where's your money? Did you put any money? Does your mouth have any money in it? Or are you just talking crap? Like guy on the corner, just talking crap. Show me when you put some money in the game. And that's what Lou did. So someone's saying he has 26. I have no idea what his net worth is. But wherever you got that, I guarantee they don't know what his net worth is. Unless they have eyes into his 401k. And if he has, like I use Morgan Stanley, if they got eyes in his account, like how would I know what Nathan's worth? How the hell could I possibly know? The only thing I know more about Lou than I know about Nathan is his salary is public, minus the locality fee. Well, even that, I could see the locality pay that he would have had at every stop he worked at. So I would know his gross pay at every stop. So I don't know how he would have amassed that. I have no idea. But wherever you got it, I guarantee they don't know. And they're throwing it out there because they want you to think that this is a get-rich-quick scheme, which is absurd when you see what this man did.
Yeah, I don't.
Absurd. It's stupid.
I don't know why money becomes this huge divisive factor so much in this topic, because frankly, when I was a kid, I was made to go to church, and I never one time when my mother was handing over money to the donation basket thought this impacts whether or not I believe the priest. Like it's like, what is going on? Like, and the fact that there are so many people on this topic who cannot accept that people actually do work, and when you do work, you get paid. Like I will never write a book for free. Like,
I hope he
don't get
makes a ton of money off this. I really do. No, it is absurd, Deb. It's but you have to understand is that when people want to tear somebody down, they need a vector. They need to find a way. They're like, okay, he has a top secret SSBI clearance and polygraphs, and he was a GS-15, and he had an Army career and was in Intel, and he served under Mad Dog Mattis. And so where can I get him? Oh, he's a grifter. Clearly, he's an arm of the government who's coming out to try to, all these kinds of things. So that's the reason why that people do this. That's the reason why people do this is they have to find a way. So go, oh, he's a grifter. You hear these idiots, scrub, content creators say it all the time. Call people grifters when really, usually when you're saying that somebody, it's really you that's doing that, but you're accusing somebody. I have never called anybody a grifter, despite that were monetized on all their platforms. We've never picked on anybody for that. We're like, hey man, awesome. We just did it ourselves. But as far as the book, because in answer to your question, Nathan, I went dark. Now I'm going to go light. Yeah, Julie, who's a library science major, authors rarely get rich. That's for sure. So here's the thing. I believe Lou is the highest ranking government official, because he's the equivalent. What did you say? Is it a colonel or 1-star general being a GS-15? I think it's like a bird colonel, kind of like Carl Nell, that rank. He's the highest ranking official to write a book. Other people have given interviews and all this, but I can't think of a government person of a higher rank that has written a book than Elizondo. I think he stuck his neck out there to get those videos released, which started the conversation. And I don't think nothing that he said in there. I mean, I think there were some anecdotes of real world incidents with pilots and so forth that I hadn't heard. So there's a couple of those that were kind of neat and juicy, but it wasn't, nothing he said in there was earth shattering, or nothing that, Debs and Nathan and Courtney would not have known or heard about before. I think you guys have heard a lot of those things. I've heard some of those things. But the highest ranking official to come out and write a book, I think, is noteworthy, and he's definitely, once again, he's leading the charge. Now, will there be another guy? Will Dave write a book, and spend a year going through the Dopser process? Anyway, I think, again, Nathan, likened what actually I'm not gonna use the analogy you use, because people will jump all over that, but it was a brilliant analogy. He's not a perfect person. He doesn't say he's a perfect person. He doesn't want you to think he actually is very self-effacing and self-deprecating in his humor. He puts others above himself. He talks about a brilliance of Hal Puthoff and Eric Davis and Jim Semivan and Steve Justice and Gary Nolan. And by the way, he has a totally different pronunciation of Cabbie Team than what Gary. That's my biggest problem with him right now. Is his different pronunciation of Cabbie Team than what Gary Nolan taught us, and made sure that one of our guests was like, "No, Deb, I want you to say it."
He's a professor. What can I say? He was trying to teach me.
I know. Beautiful, right? I know. You should be a professor yourself. So, yeah, I think it was brilliant what he did, and I'm just hoping that a wider audience reads it, and then with that, they can put more pressure on legislators, because they've read this. Hey, I read this book by this guy, says he was a Pentagon guy. What are we doing about this? Because there's nobody who would listen to that audiobook and go, he sounds like a nutter. So I think we're in a great place, Nathan, in terms of that, of the disclosure movement. I think he did it again, in terms of he made another step forward that everybody else can now follow.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great effort for sure. And well, we're wrapping the show, and I just wanted to, thank our listeners and our, viewers for kind of going along this conversation with us. We got some great questions from the audience. Hey, Mick, Really appreciate you joining us.
Hey, Mick.
This is an important conversation to have, and I think all of the perspectives are worthwhile and valid. And when we talk about people that are disenfranchised, I understand why, right? We've been on the receiving end of decades of disinformation, misinformation. There are noted actual grifters in ufology that have taken advantage of people and have fleeced people of money and their hopes and their time and their passion. And look, no human being wants to be made a fool, right? If you've ever felt like a fool, you don't want to feel it again, right? So, and if you felt like a fool a lot, you've got your guard up and you've developed a very thick skin and shell so that you're not going to get hurt again. And people who have had that kind of life experience, I understand why you are naturally very skeptical of this kind of information, of these kinds of individuals, because it's difficult to trust them. And I think it's okay. It's totally okay to kind of suspend your trust for a little while until we get better information. And I hope that you can, sort of at least support that effort, that we get, as much effort as we can into getting to the heart of what is really going on here, that we can get some greater transparency into this issue, because it's been plaguing the American public for a long time. And if these insiders are just all making it up and all consumed by some fantasy story, well, that's a story in and of itself, right? That's a huge problem that we need to kind of address within our government. So I think that's something we can all get behind. Eli, thank you so much for that super sticker. Really appreciate it.
Eli, thank you so much for the blessing. We really do appreciate it. It's really awesome for Cab. We're getting closer. My browser's not functioning. Can you drop off the Imminent link? Yes, I can do that. It'll just take me a second before we close the show. Debs!
Yeah, I'm absorbing some of the things that we've gone over, and I think we need to just highlight some underlying themes. One of the themes is Lou is a human being, just like everybody else. Let's get past this Messiah thing that some people get into, or this villain thing that people get into for him. He's just a human being like everybody else. He shared a very honest, from his perspective, portrayal of what he went through. And he even admits that he doesn't really know everything, just like everyone else in the government. And I think, we just have to, we can carry on thinking the way we want to, and he gives us permission to do that. He even says that, like, think what you want. But we have to focus on sort of like that underlying statement. Something wasn't working right in our government related to this topic, whether you believe it was NHI or foreign adversaries. That was a risk, and they're doing something about that. Lou's doing something, Grush is doing something, Melon's doing something, Semivan, so on. A lot of very intelligent people who have a lot of experience and expertise to offer are coming forward and telling people something is wrong and something needs to be done about it. So
I want to throw in one more thing to add on to that, since you mentioned Semivan, and I just, for you and Nathan and our folks in the chat, that link that Nathan put up right there, that is the tiny link right there. If you click on that, it'll get you into Amazon and get you the book, and also you can get the Audible link from there. And for a lot of us, obviously the Audible is very, very helpful, so that we can use it during our commutes and so forth. Oh, there you go. Lou's YouTube channel. Thank you, Jules. Jim Semivan, I want you guys to try to imagine being a CIA officer, senior officer at his level, and going into work and reporting that you were essentially abducted by UFOs. I can't tell you how difficult that would be. I just can't.
Huge.
I mean, Nathan, can you imagine saying it to your boss?
No. And and the stakes for me are way lower than they are for Jim. So yeah, it's a huge deal.
And they believed him.
Yeah.
And they brought in some guys to come in there and interview him that freaked him out, guys. And, I work in a facility that is pretty secure. And I saw something like that the other day. There was a DV in the building, and guys showed up that didn't have the badges on that they would need to have. So I knew, and they were security for that individual. So these things happen, and that's what Jim described, and it's an incredible amount of courage. I can't imagine telling your boss that and him not thinking you're a loon, but that's how much they trusted him.
Yep.
Powerful.
Yeah, for sure.
Thank you, everybody. Jules, it's really irritating that you're the smartest person in the room every time, and that you're able to contextualize every damn thing. Where did you go to contextualization school? Do you have a degree in it? Can you please tell me? Is it an Indiana thing? What's going on? God bless Indiana for you, Jules. Thank you. And so, Jessica, who popped in earlier, it looks like she's packing to move, but we made her a new mod, so you should see Miss Jessica NB. She, former Army veteran, former EOD, by the way. Like, if you make a mistake, things go boom. And she told me her deployment dates. I think she served from 09 to 17. She does some veterans volunteer stuff, and she's going to be a guest on for True Crime, for the True Crime stuff. Next week, actually Saturday, 2 days from today, anybody who's interested in Cab TCU, we're having on Mike Crawford of the Young Jerks. Jerks is spelled very coolly, Jurks, which I think is really cool. And Mike is going to talk about Karen Reed trial and Sandra Birchmore. There was just a huge arrest in the Sandra Birchmore case. They arrested the police officer who, how do I say this, groomed her from a teenager and impregnated her and then killed her because his wife was having a baby and he didn't want to have 4 babies. So he killed her and her baby. So it's very difficult stuff, but we will talk about it on Cab TCU. Very difficult content. So, Julie's been following it. Julie now is an expert in Karen Reed and Sandra Birchmore. Is that a surprise, Nathan?
Nope, not at all.
Yeah, she jumps in the chat and she's asking like these super in-depth questions when I have panelists on who are from Massachusetts, and Julie spent 5 minutes to figure the case out. So anyway,
Love it.
I know. Deb, thank you so much, girlfriend.
Yeah, I'm glad I got through some of my technological glitches.
I salute you.
Here.
I salute you. It was so awesome to have you on. And Money Nathan as well, man. I got to talk to you last night, so I missed you guys. The contextualizer in the house. You are. I know, Jules. You might as well revel in it, man. Flowers and, All right. Love you guys. Love everybody in the chat. On behalf of Nathan, Debs, this is DJ saying peace out, one love. We'll see you down the road. And guess what? Another Cab episode is just around the bend.